but dead air is the story of this program, or at least the first thing we're reviewing here tonight. Here's the deal, everybody. We're not watching SmackDown. I'm putting my foot down. I'll probably, you know what? We should at least watch the Thursday debut because it is the return match of Daniel Bryan.
That would be the biggest thing to happen on SmackDown in years.
That's right. Although I should warn everybody that I think that if you are a fan of Daniel Bryan, I do suggest that you watch Raw tomorrow because I think that he might make a surprise appearance on that show. But he does officially return on SmackDown, so we should review that particular show. But I made it through the Roman Reigns promo. And granted, I was not planning on watching the entire SmackDown show, but I did, since everybody had been requesting it, watch the Roman Reigns promo. And let's just say that if I had planned on watching SmackDown, that would have been the end right there. I would have begun my boycott at that moment. This promo was so terrible. And it wasn't even long. As you noted, at least it was short. But it was so bad. A bad, terrible, horrible, awful promo. And I don't know how many people listened to Observer Live this afternoon. I know there was a lot of football going on, so a lot of you probably missed it. But let me tell you something about Roman Reigns that I talked about on that show today. Roman Reigns, Vinny, I know you've got nephews, as I do.
True.
And I'm sure that you shopped for them for the Christmas season. And I'm sure that you have spent some time in the toy aisle, here or there.
I have in my life, yes.
Hopefully not with a copy of Sports Illustrated. But in the toy aisle, you see all of the toys that little boys want to buy.
Mm-hmm.
And they all have something in common. Violence.
Yes.
Violence and bigness.
I was once in a Toys R Us at Christmas season, and I was looking at some of the Lego stuff. And there were a couple of older women shopping for a young boy, and they were debating which Lego set to get for this young boy. And they said one was like pirates, and one was like just generic Legos. And she says, I think we should get the generic Lego one because the pirates one, all they can do is fight, and the others, they can do whatever he wants them to do. And I stifled a laugh. I just wanted to tell them, ladies, I heard them say this boy is 8 years old. He wants to make them fight.
That's right.
That's what boys like.
We went shopping for Carlos over Christmas, and he wanted a Nerf gun. And Whitney, who is not a fan of violence, didn't want to buy him a Nerf gun because it's a gun. And we're looking around in the toy area, and eventually we came to the conclusion there is nothing here that is not violent for little boys that they would possibly want. So we ended up getting him the Nerf gun. But anyway.
And he loved it.
And he loved it very much. So, if you go through the toy aisle, you will see all sorts of action figures. And they all have something in common. They're big and muscly.
Yes.
And they look like action figures, because they are, in fact, action figures. With the exception of his wrestling ability and his promos, which we'll get to, with the exception of his wrestling ability, Roman Reigns is every last single solitary thing that Vince McMahon would want in his top guy. He's got long, flowing hair. He looks like an action figure. Vince doesn't care about this so much, but he's a legit athlete. He was a great football player. Am I right?
He was very good at a high level, yes.
He was a very good football player at a high level. He's a pretty bad motherfucker.
Yeah.
He's not going to beat you in a UFC fight. He's not going to beat Cain Velasquez.
He beat me in a UFC fight.
He beat you.
Yeah.
He's not going to beat Cain Velasquez. But you know what? If you were in a bar and trouble was getting started, you'd want Roman Reigns there to back you up.
That's right.
Because he'd take out somebody's eyeball, he'd bite their nose off, he'd beat the shit out of them, one way or the other. He has a great voice. He's got a cool factor about him. The idea that Vince McMahon could be fucking this guy up is so astonishing to me. And when I watched his promo, I was just in awe. Because these promos, as I'm sure some of you are aware by now, this is all Vince McMahon. Vince McMahon is writing these terrible promos for Roman Reigns. I don't know what is in his brain, but it's not, let's get this guy over at a high level. Clearly, And if that's what's in his brain, then maybe CM Punk is right and he has lost touch. Because they, and by they I mean Vince, they have found a way to make a guy who should be so cool absolutely, completely uncool. When you are trying to make a new top guy, it is just like the changing of the generations. Vinny and I are Generation X. And there's a lot of youngsters today, these millennials that Vince McMahon was talking about in his podcast with Steve Austin. He was bitching about these millennials because that's what old people do. They bitch about the new generation. And you want to know why they do that? Because every new generation is different from the generation that came before it. I don't understand millennials. I don't dislike them. But they do a lot of things that I don't get because I am an Xer. And I'm sure that all of the boomers that came before me didn't know what the fuck was going on with these crazy Xers. And all of these nice young millennials, when the next generation comes along, they're not going to understand them either. Because every generation that comes along is different from the generation that came before it. And the same thing goes for your top star in WWE. In order for your new top star to be your new top star, he's got to be different from the guy that came before him. Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart were nothing like Hulk Hogan. You know who was a lot like Hulk Hogan? The Ultimate Warrior. And guess what? It didn't work. You know who was very different from pretty boy Shawn Michaels with his long flowing hair? Stone Cold Steve Austin, the badass. And you know who was very different from Stone Cold Steve Austin was The Rock. And you know who was very different from The Rock was John Cena. Although John Cena wasn't quite different enough from The Rock, and that's why John Cena hasn't really gotten over to the degree that other long-term big-time stars have gotten over in the past. The moral of the story is, if you want to make Roman Reigns your next guy, it's fucking easy. Roman Reigns is nothing like John Cena. But Vince McMahon is trying really fucking hard to make him the next John Cena. He's given him the same stupid John Cena comedy interview bullshit. He's doing the same kind of simple, basic, goofy matches, just like everybody else on this roster. And this guy is not going to be your next guy if you keep pushing him like this. But you know what? If you make him a badass sports star who never talks and never does stupid promos, and he just talks about how he's going to kick your ass, and he's dressed all in black, and he's got long hair, you could conceivably make this guy your next top guy. But the stuff they're doing right now, it's not going to work. I guarantee it. To steal a line from Tyson Kidd, this is a fact. That's all I got to say about that.
It was terrible. If you missed it, he referenced how Seth was full of himself and then corrected himself and said, no, you're full of something else. Sick burn.
Yeah.
He said Seth was full of suffering succotash. He looked in the camera and winked. He added that Seth had donkey dung for brains. Now, that was really it.
I'm just sighing. I can barely catch my breath.
Less than 2 minutes this promo took. The thing of it is, a fight broke out, and then Kane came out, and Big Show came out, and Kane's dialogue was nearly as bad. Now, it doesn't matter because he's Kane. He's always
what did he say? Because as soon as he said the first line, I shut it off.
Something like, whoever volunteers to be your partner will suffer the disapproval of the authority.
There was some sentence that didn't even make sense.
Yeah.
But that was what he meant.
What I wrote was they would piss the authority off, and that's not what he said.
No.
So, the thing of it is, this show sucks bad every week. And if I had not been alerted that there was a horrible promo in the show, and if we had not read the spoilers and decided the show was not worth our time, I would not have thought any worse of this than any other episode of SmackDown. It's just an awful show.
That's sad.
I agree.
So anyway, everybody, we're not going to review SmackDown, but luckily we have two really, really good shows that we are going to review tonight. One being NXT, and one being Lucha Underground. And let me tell you something, everybody. Raw and SmackDown have been horrible for like 4 straight months now. And I have been hoping that come January, when Royal Rumble season starts and WrestleMania season, it's going to get better, because most years it does. But I have very little faith in that happening this year. And I got to say, the Royal Rumble is going to have to be pretty fucking good to be better than the Royal Rumble that Dario Cueto invented here on the Lucha Underground show.
I would be stunned.
That was a great match.
Yeah. It really
And
was.
NXT is just continues to boggle the mind that it is produced by the exact same company that produces Raw and SmackDown. It's impossible to me.
That's because the senile, withering old fool who runs WWE does not pay attention to NXT.